have access via PAVER 7.0 web to an online PAVER database. So hopefully that'll some cells that you can update, and if there's some changes required for cells that that are locked, then we're asking you to document those things in the remark columns. Next slide, please. Okay, there's some resources that are available out there on the left side of this slide. The overarching business processes. I think many of you are probably already familiar with the Integration Program Group homepage and the Millbook page and whatnot. What you may not have seen before is this consolidated list of some of the TNAP resources. The airfield roll-up PCI spreadsheets are available on the link that you see there. Now, I hesitated a little bit there because as early as this morning and this afternoon, Mr. Lee and myself have been going through a few minor changes, things that had to do with rounding errors and business rules, to make sure that we had this as good as it could possibly be at this point. So I'm tweaking that, and then this evening and tomorrow I will be separating the roll-up spreadsheet into a spreadsheet for each individual MAGCOM, and those will be posted up on that site. So, and I've had a couple of questions about why the older one's still up there. I've been trying to respond to questions that have come in since this morning's DCO and haven't really had a chance to finish breaking that spreadsheet out. So, for those of you that are interested in getting PAVER, the PAVER download site is listed there, and we have instructions on what you need to do to install it, get it installed on your computer, and access codes, authorization codes, and things like that. So you'll find those on our pavement evaluation community of practice site. Let's see, which is actually the same site where the Air Force roll-up PCI spreadsheets are. The PAVER manual and training slides are available on the PAVER site, and you can get if you do not already have copies of your PCI survey report and all of the source data, you can get the bulk of that information on our pavement evaluation report website. Later on, you'll see that you were supposed to get source documents on your disk. If for some reason that disk has been lost over time, you can contact me and we can try and get you those source documents as well. And that's essentially the Word documents that go into building your PCI reports. We have the link to AFI 321041, which is the pavement evaluation AFI, and it outlines a lot of the criteria that we've implemented in the spreadsheet. The Unified Facility Criteria site has UFCs on PCI surveys and the procedures and what I want to say, distress manuals for airfield PCIs. We are in the process of publishing ETL 14-3, the Preventive Maintenance Plan ETL. That's been in the works for a little while. It essentially outlines a procedure for establishing a preventive maintenance plan, and it has a risk analysis procedure that we actually implemented in this spreadsheet. And you'll see that as part of the savings to investment ratio when we go to look at the spreadsheet. But that is not currently posted. We got the editorial comments last night or this morning, and I think it was last night, and we're in the process of addressing those editorial comments, but we expect that it'll be posted here in the next, I'm going to say, week, hopefully, if we don't have any issues. I think that covers it. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's the preliminaries. This is what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to cover the sub-bullets under the first major bullet there, and then we're going to transition over to Brian to talk a little bit about developing a project with the data that we provided in the spreadsheet. Next slide, please. Okay, why did we build this spreadsheet the way that we have? Really, it's intended to help the installations and the MAGCOMs rack and stack the requirements that they have for their different pavement maintenance and repair issues. We wanted to be able to automate some of these processes so that it was simple and straightforward. You populate the data, and then you get an outcome, and that you can then copy and paste into some of the other tools that you'll be using when you develop projects. We also wanted to try and get updated information since the last PCI survey that we can incorporate into the databases. And earlier today, I had some questions about how the bases are going to the effort of populating this spreadsheet, and their concern was that we would not be, it'd just go into the spreadsheet and nobody would be using it. But we do intend to use it and intend to try and update the PAVER databases with that information. So the next time the PCI team or the structural evaluation team goes out, they'll have that information available as a baseline to start from. Okay, what is in the spreadsheet? And essentially we've taken the data from the PAVER databases from the last PCI survey at each base. We've rolled all of those up into a single PAVER database for all of our bases, and we've created a report with that data that kind of summarizes all of that information in a spreadsheet format. Now, there's some things that we do not currently have in PAVER that we need to be able to populate. And first and foremost is the linear segmentation data. I'll talk a little bit about that more. And then we have the engineering assessment data. And that's like the FOD potential rating, the skid rating, or skid index, and the structural index, or ACN to PCN ratio. And I'll talk a little bit more about those. Our intention is to start getting that information populated in the PAVER databases where it hasn't been there before. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, we have added this SIR computation from the new Preventive Maintenance ETL 1403. Okay, and the spreadsheet that we're going to talk about is, once again, is posted at that location. So that's a duplicate of the link that we had before. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how to use it. Next slide, please. Okay, when you open the spreadsheet, it's going to open up to the Instruction tab. And at the top of the Instruction tab, we've provided an overview of what's in here, some of the limitations on the information, and some explanation as to why we're asking for some of the information, what we're going to do with it in a little bit more detail than I described to you, and kind of the objective of the overall effort. Next slide. Further down that same Instruction tab, we have explanations about the color codes that we're using in the sheet. And I'm not going to go through each one of those. I'll let you do that on your own. But we've tried to highlight the kind of the categories of information, if you will, that we're looking for in each area. Next slide, please. Okay, in addition to the color codes, we have included a description of the data that's in each cell. So we tell you not only what information is there, but we're saying whether you need to take any action with regard to the cell, and if you do, how we would like to see you populate that information. Next slide. Okay, so that was the Instructions tab, and then we move over to the Example tab. Now in the Example tab, we've tried to go into a little bit more detail about some of the cells, a little bit more detail than what we did in the instructions, just so that you can see firsthand what your spreadsheet was going to look like once you get the information populated. And you'll see that I believe that we have like 11 different steps, and you'll see some of those throughout the next couple of slides, some of the tips that we've included in there. Next slide, please. Okay, the next tab is the RollUp Requirements tab. And this is where you're actually going to be inputting the information. And I'm going to walk through some of the cells here on the next slide, kind of showing you how, where you're going to get that information from. Okay, let's go ahead and move to the next one. All right, as I mentioned earlier, the first bit of information that we're going to look for is some of the pavement facility information, the linear segmentation information, if you will. So as I'm sure most of you are aware, hopefully all of you are aware, we had a tasker that went out in April of 2013 from General Buyers to create pavement facility maps for all of your airfield pavements and all of your roads and parking pavements. If we had received your pavement facility map and incorporated it into a recent PCI survey, that data should be populated. If it's populated, we're asking you just to take a look at it and verify it and make sure that we have the latest and greatest. And if there's any changes, please note them, and it would be good if you entered information in the remarks to the effect that you'd made adjustments to what we had populated there. If it is not populated, then we're asking you to use that pavement facility map that you have from the tasker that your real property officer, geobase folks, and pavement engineers and others have been working on for your base. And then to also use a copy of the last PCI report section map to try and correlate the sections and facilities. You also may find your ACE's real property report helpful in trying to get the relationship between facility number, RPU ID, and making sure you have the right category codes. Now, we're going to tell you up front that if you have not had a recent PCI survey and you are trying to populate that data from your pavement map in the PCI survey section map the way I just described, there's going to be disconnects. And what we're asking is you just do the best you can with it, okay? If you have issues and you're not certain what to do, please call your MAGCOM or AFCAC for help. We would like to get as much of that data populated as possible. It is possible that we may reach an impasse and we're just going to have to wait until we do the next PCI to resolve all the conflicts. And in the end, when we do the next PCI or structural evaluation, we will be resolving all of those issues, and we should have all of our information on the same sheet of music. Next evaluation. Next slide, please. Okay, I had mentioned a couple of sources of data, and I just wanted to give you a pictorial view of what I'm talking about. So when I said your pavement facility map from GeoBase, this is an example from one location. You can see the pavement facility numbers there, 9 for the aprons, 24 for that warm-up apron up in the upper right. And so then you would look at your PCI section map, and you would see that that warm-up apron that has facility number 24 correlates to section A05 Bravo. And you can see all of these different sections that we have on the main apron would correlate to facility 9, so forth. And in some instances, like the pavement facility map that we have shown here, it has the facility number on there. Many other bases had generated these maps with the RPU ID, and we were taking either one. And so you may find it useful to have a real property data report from ACES that will help you correlate between the facility numbers and the RPU IDs if you don't already have it. Next slide, please. Okay, this is an example of the, this is the example spreadsheet. And the first bit of data that we're highlighting here is the FOD information. And let me see if there's some things that we want to highlight here. And you'll see in the FOD aircraft group, when you click on that cell, you're going to get a pull-down menu, and it's going to have 3 choices, and that's going to be F16 group, KC135 group, and C17 group. And I'll show you an example of that on the next slide. Yeah, let's go ahead and move to the next one. Okay, and so in the lower, on the lower table there, you can see those standard aircraft groups, F16, KC135, C17, and that comes right out of AFI 32-1041, which we gave you a link to earlier. In some cases, you're going to see that your PCI report actually calls out what that standard aircraft group is, one of those 3. If for some reason it does not, as in the example that I have here where they have T38 listed, then you would go ahead and look at where your aircraft falls, or which group your aircraft falls into, and then go ahead and pick the appropriate aircraft group from the drop-down menu. And then you'll copy the FOD potential rating, the FOD potential index, I'm sorry, into the spreadsheet in the appropriate column. Next slide, please. Okay, the next bit of information that we're asking you to populate has to do with the structural index. And we're looking for the critical aircraft and the ACN to PCN ratio, which we also call the structural index. And you're going to get that information, next slide, from the engineering assessment appendix, the same as you did with the FOD information. And you will enter the critical aircraft for your particular base. Now, the critical aircraft for structural index is a little bit different than with FOD, whereas with FOD we just had all the aircraft were grouped into 3 groups. In this particular instance, you're actually going to have an aircraft. And in this particular instance, they listed both T1 and T38, so that's a little bit, maybe may cause a little bit of confusion on your part. Typically, you're just going to see 1 aircraft in that column. But if you do see more than one and there's a question about which one is the critical, you can give us a call, either your MAGCOM or myself, and we'll be happy to help you with that. And then you're also going to copy and paste the information regarding the structural index into the appropriate cell. And the way that the spreadsheet is organized, you should not have to do this one cell at a time and fat finger it in. You ought to be able to actually copy and paste. Now, with if you're using the PDF, it may be a little bit more difficult. You might have to copy and paste it into an intermediate document, a Word document, or an Excel spreadsheet. Or if you have the source documents, which is really the easiest way, then just go into the table in the Word document, and it's very easy to copy and paste those. And once again, as I said earlier, if you don't have the source documents for some reason and you would like me to get those to you, just give me a call, shoot me an email, and we'll get that information to you. Next slide. Okay, the last one that we're asking for in regards to engineering assessment information, which is what we've traditionally called it, is the friction index. Now, you'll note that in this example, the first block there is empty. And the reason for that is that we only will create friction data or do friction testing for runways. And so for your aprons and your overruns and your taxiways, you'll just leave those cells blank, and the instructions will describe that to you. And let me show you where you're going to get that information. Next slide, please. Okay. So you'll, once again, in the engineering assessment tables, you'll find a list of the sections and the friction characteristics for each of those sections. Now, typically, you're going to see a number listed in the column that says friction index. But in this particular case, when they published this report, they included as the description of good, fair, or poor. Okay? If you do run into that situation, then what we ask you to do is one of two things. Either go ahead and enter 0.5 for good, 0.45 for fair, and 0.39 for poor, or if you would like to go to your friction report, also known as a skid report, then you can use that data to do the correlation yourself. And that's a little bit more time consuming, because the way, in the past, the way they have presented the friction data isn't necessarily correlated to each section. So you'll have to look at how many feet on the runway the data was recorded to, and then try and correlate that with the section. So it's a little bit more time consuming, but it can be done. Okay, next slide, please. Let's see here. What do we want to talk about? Okay, so once we've got the data populated, the information that you are populating, we get into the cells where the automatic computations take place. And so in this particular case, we're showing you that we're going to populate the adjusted PCI, and that is based on the 2015 PCI. So let me just clarify what I mean by that. So when your PCI survey was conducted, it could have been 3 years ago, and it had a PCI as of the date that we conducted the inspection. And so in 2015, obviously, there's going to be some deterioration. So we've computed that that projected PCI for 2015 based on the deterioration rate for your pavement. And then that 2015 PCI is then further adjusted based on the FOD deduct, the structural deduct, and the skid deduct. And that computation is laid out in the spreadsheet and in the instructions so that you can see what's going on there. Once we have the adjusted PCI, we use that to determine the probability of failure. And essentially, we're doing a correlation between the adjusted PCI and the probability of failure score from the business rules in Appendix B. And we're showing an example of that down below. And I'm trying to, so if you were to look in that matrix in Appendix B and you found the adjusted PCI of 65, you would see that the probability of failure was a 71. Okay. Next to that, we have the adjusted MDI, and that number there is simply the MDI for that particular pavement type, whether it's a runway, a taxiway, or an apron, and it's adjusted based on whether it's a primary, secondary, or tertiary pavement. If it's a primary pavement, it'll just be the MDI value. If it's a secondary pavement, it'll be the MDI times 0.9. And if it's a tertiary pavement, it'll be the MDI times 0.7. Now, like I say, that's populated automatically. The savings to investment ratio, the SIR, is a value that is computed based on the risk analysis that is included in ETL 1403 that I mentioned earlier. That we're getting ready to do the final publication on. Now, that ETL was developed by a number of your MAGCOM pavement engineers, actually a number of MAGCOM pavement engineers and base pavement engineers that provided input to that. It was a very long process. Then that draft ETL was vetted through all of the major commands, and we adjudicated all the comments. So it's been through a fairly rigorous process. It took us, if I remember correctly, about 18 months. So it took a good bit of work. Now, we have today entered one additional column here between SIR and SCORE, and that's savings. And based on some of the comments and discussion that we had today, we went ahead and added that column in there. I won't go into the details on that right now, but when you see the final spreadsheet, if you have any questions, please give us a call and we'll go through it with you. It will be described in the instructions and the example. Okay, the last column here in purple is this. Oh, let's go back one more. Thank you. The last column in the purple is the SCORE, and essentially what that is just the sum of the probability of failure, the adjusted MDI, and not the savings to investment ratio, but the savings. And earlier today we had it as the sum of with the savings to investment ratio, but like I said, we made a minor change to that to ensure that we were in compliance with all the business rules that were previously published. Okay, and then finally, you can see in the remarks block, that's where we're asking you to go ahead and add remarks as much as you can. And the specific example that we have shown here is that the runway was reconstructed, and that if you were able to see over a little bit to the right, under the 2015 PCI before M&R, you would have changed the PCI to 100 in that, and that would have driven some changes to the rest of the computations. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so now that you've done all of those computations, we wanted to try and show you how that kind of relates to the risk matrix that that we have in the business rules. Okay, so there's a little bit of terminology difference between what's in the business rules and what we've got on our spreadsheet, and there's some reasons for that. Okay, and one of them that I've highlighted is the adjusted MDI, and really, as I said before, that's just the MDI times 1 times 0.9 times 0.7, depending on whether it's primary, secondary, or tertiary. And you can see up on the left, they have consequence of failure and the adjudicated MDI. And so we're using the adjusted MDI in the same manner that you would use the consequence of failure that we're showing in the business rules, but it's slightly different just for the purpose of defining the requirements. And remember that this chart, this table that you're seeing here, is intended for use once you combine your requirements into projects. So we're kind of taking a little bit of license in using the adjusted MDI for the TNAP part of the process. So essentially in the example that we've got here, you can see that the probability of failure is a 43. The adjusted MDI is an 86, and that's where that project would fall within this matrix as a moderate risk. Okay, next slide. Oh, there was one other. Oh, yeah, all right, we got it. That's good. That's all right. Never mind. Next slide. So the last tab that we have is, no, let me back up one moment. My apologies. Okay, this is kind of the far right data that you'll find on the spreadsheet. And what we're showing here is the total cost. Now, you can see that the $23,251 that I've got highlighted there, that cost is a parametric estimate. Okay, so the way that's generated is that we look at what the cost is for doing different types of repairs on your pavement based on either local cost data or means cost data. And from that information, we generate cost by condition curves for each base. And so that cost is based on the type of work that needs to be performed at your specific base, and uses either your local cost data or means cost data adjusted for your location. Okay? Now, you may, as part of this effort, decide that you want to do a more detailed cost estimate. And if you decide to do that, you can go to the extrapolated distress tables that are in the PCI report, in the appendix with the reinspection reports. And you can look, you can count up the types of distresses and the quantities of those distresses and use that to do an estimate based on your either means cost data or local cost data. And there's cost tables and maintenance policy tables in the PCI report that can help you with developing that cost estimate. Okay, and once you've done that detailed cost estimate, we ask you to go ahead and adjust that cost in this column so that we have the most accurate cost possible for your requirement that you're going to take forward into your project. And next slide. Okay, and the last tab in the spreadsheet is the report view. And so all of the information that you entered and the computations that we made are kind of distilled down to this bit of information. And what the intention here is that when you combine the requirements that we have highlighted in with red boxes here, when you combine those into a project that and enter that information into ACEs, that we would like for you to go ahead and copy and paste that information into, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Brian, but it's remarks. He'll get us straight when he takes over here, but you'll be copying that information into ACEs. So with that, I believe that's a good transition point back over to you, Brian.
Okay, you saw in the previous slide the data that's going to be pasted into this worksheet. So I went ahead and did that as an example here, filled in the square footage of work column. And you can see that at the bottom of the page, it calculated the weighted average condition index once that information is pasted in. Same with the weighted average MDI, and it calculated the total project cost. Next slide. Okay, other data that you need to paste into ACES is you copy and paste the information. You look at the bottom of this page, you see where you paste this information into the remarks section of the project text field. So obviously, open up the project programming slide, click on text, open up that the project text field and paste it right in. Please note that the columns will not line up exactly when you paste the information in. Don't worry about it. You don't have to make adjustments. This shows where you load your probability of failure, consequences of failure, and your SIR data. You click on the other cost screen, it opens up the project at the top, and you just enter the data in, and you notice there that the information is converted into dollars. Don't worry about that. It won't affect how the Air Force uses the data. Next slide. That concludes the formal presentation. We'll now move into the question and answer phase. And Zach Sheen will read out the questions, and George and I will answer the questions.
All right, the first question we received, have you sent this tasking out yet for the spreadsheets? I don't remember seeing it.
That's a great question. We just updated the Transportation AMP guidance on page 48 of the Master Business Rules to make it clear that the MAGCOMs need to submit this rolled up PAVER database to AFCAMP by the MAMP submission date, which is 16 May of 2014.
There's a question out there, what about non-pavement projects such as bridges?
Okay, due to limited funds and based on recently approved Air Force IPLs, very few non-pavement TNAP requirements are likely to receive high MAGCOM priorities. If you have a non-pavement requirement that absolutely must be funded in fiscal year 15 or 16, fully explain the situation in the ACES PM programming text remarks section and work with your MAGCOM to get a high priority. AFCAMP will prioritize issues like this on an exception basis with MAGCOM participation.
Next question said, can you post the draft ETL 14-3 on the website?
If you go to page 2 of the slides, there is a link there. That's probably the easiest way to get the link.
Yeah, Brian, let me, before you go on, so it is not posted to that link yet. That's on the whole building design guide is where we ultimately will put it. I think that the things that we have to edit right now are fairly minor. So.
All right, next question. Will future PCI reports generate the roll-up spreadsheet since all data generates from PCI report? I don't know if that makes sense to you, George.
One thing I'll say is that in the future, the bases will not have to enter as much data as we are doing this year. In future years, when we have the PCI studies done, that data will update the centralized PAVER database. And this year's efforts are going to populate the missing fields. So next year, mostly what's going to be done is the bases will be validating the information that's in here and letting us know if information has changed.
How will preventative maintenance projects, i.e. joint sealant replacement, rank in this linear segmentation process? If your joint sealant has failed but the pavement has a good PCI, how will the project score?
Okay, most likely what's going to happen is if you have a high PCI, and it's your runway, it's not going to score as well as a lower PCI project, and so it's not going to compete as strongly unless the MAGCOM weighs in and gives it a higher priority for the MDI, the consequence of failure portion of the project. So that's really how it's going to be driven, is the POF and the COF, as well as the savings to investment ratio scoring.
What will the bases do if the friction and structural data in the PCI report are outdated? Will bases be required to manually recalculate friction and structural indices?
George, are you on the line?
He's back. Stand by 1 sec. We lost George for a second. Where's he at? You see him on there, Liz? Okay. Go ahead, George.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can.
Okay, yeah, I guess I lost connectivity there. So if I recall the question, or if I heard it correctly, it has to do with the shelf life of the structural and skid information. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so for structural information, okay, in most instances, if you're not performing, if you're not reconstructing, let me say it that way, a section, then the structural index should not change significantly from one evaluation to the next. Okay, if you have reconstructed that section, then what we're asking, we're making the assumption that you reconstructed it to where it is adequate for supporting the mission that you have. And so we're going to say input a structural index of 1. Okay, now many people ask, well, if I do a random slab replacement or a partial slab replacement on a section, isn't that going to increase the structural index or the PCN of that section? And the answer to that is yes, in some cases it might, but in other cases it would not. And because there's uncertainty there, we're just asking you to stay with the structural index that you had from the last PCI. Now, regarding friction, that does have more of a shelf life than the structural index. And what we're asking you to do is to go ahead and use the friction information from your last evaluation. Now, if there is a compelling reason to believe that you have issues with friction characteristics at your base, then we would ask you to note that in the remarks so that we can take that into account. Okay?
The next question, why can't AFCAMP team do that since they will be modifying the shape files for sections to comply with linear segmentation rules? Otherwise, bases will have to revise it again after the AFCAMP team makes changes.
I'm not sure what do that is.
I believe the comment was in reference to updating the pavement maps and tying it to GeoBase potentially.
Okay, so when we when either our consultant or our IP team goes to do a pavement evaluation, the first thing they're going to do is to accept the pavement facility map and in the common installation picture for the pavement facilities. And then they are going to do the resegmentation of the branches and sections and align those shapes and the data associated with them with the pavement facility map. So they're going to do that part. Now, if in the course of preparing for that PCI survey, the consultant
George, we lost your audio there.
Stand by, everyone. We've been having audio issues periodically, so we'll get George back online and then we'll continue.
You lost it. Well, while George is out getting connected again, and we're going to answer a couple of the questions that came up. One was with respect to the max SIR score. It said, what is the max SIR score? If relatively low, why not score requirements without SIR and compute SIRs for only the high requirements? Why bother computing SIR for low scoring requirements? So this is a big piece to what we're trying to get as part of all our requirements is savings matters, whether it's O&M dollars for preventative and corrective maintenance or whether it is energy dollars. We want to be able to capture those savings so that we can account for it. You know, we're doing a lot of stuff out there that isn't getting captured. So SIR, the max score you can get in the SIR on a risk-based project is 10 points. That means anything with an SIR over 1.0 will get 10 points. Otherwise, it's basically multiply your SIR, anything between 0 and 1 times 10, and that's the number of points you get. So that's how it scores in the model. With respect to the question, why don't we just do it for part of it? Well, we kind of want to change the culture, and like I said, we want to make savings part of everything, so we want to make sure that we're accounting for it on everything that we do.
Okay. Am I back now?
George, you are back.
Okay. Can you tell me where I cut out?
Yeah, you cut out. You basically explained the first half in terms of the pavement maps, and then you were talking about in preparation for a PCI survey.
Okay. My apologies. We had no cutouts this morning. Not sure what's going on this afternoon. At any rate, as part of the PCI, we're going to get the pavement facility map, or get the pavement facility map and the common installation picture from the base. We're going to review that, redo the segmentation in preparation for the evaluation, and
Boston, Jim. George, we lost you again.
Yeah, cut out again. Okay, we're having continuous audio problems with George, so I will take the questions I can answer, and then George is going to write answers to the remainder and post them. If you showed it. Okay. Okay, there's a question there. If you have both F15s and 35s, you have to go to the table that says which group are they in. If they're in two different groups, then talk to George Van Steenberg to determine which group to use. If they're all in the same group, then use the main aircraft and pick that one.
The question in this morning's TNAP app webinar, somebody said that the spreadsheet you're referring to does not match the 21 January 14 version posted.
Okay. Yeah, this is a continuing process, and George had in the briefing slide a screenshot of an earlier version of the PAVER database, and so there was no match. He's since gone in there and fixed the data, and actually his data from this morning he's made some improvements on too. So there will be continue to be some issues as we discover needed improvements, and if you find other improvements along the way, please let us know and we'll continue to revise this. We would prefer to not have any errors, but we're doing a pretty big turning of the Titanic, and hopefully we'll have everything perfect soon.
All right, there's a question, as Whiteman points out, in Builder you can select just a portion of the building to be evaluated, i.e. the HVAC repair only requires HVAC component condition index. If you have a high severity joint seal, why do you need the entire pavement PCI?
Okay, the way we bundle projects in PAVER, that's completely up to the base as to what requirements you need to program in the project. And if I were at the base, I'm going to put together the requirements that are going to score the best to give the most likely probability of getting funding. So,
so in short, focus on the requirement and what's the issue. And if your pavement's in fine shape or your joint sealant's not, then focus on that and use the condition index of that as part of your score to develop your POF. Should basis on design projects on ACES? PCI survey.
No, George has a plan to do PCI surveys every 4 years, right?
yeah.
That process has not changed.
So the next question, should the base submit design projects in ACES to get updated PCI survey, or will MAGCOMs take care of the base?
We have a formalized process that we are continuing to use for that. Bases do not need to submit requests for PCI surveys. And I think the rest of the questions we'll give to George.
George answered fair Joe.
That's all the questions we have in the chat box. If you have any more, please type them in. Otherwise, just so you guys are aware in the field, we are answering all these Q&A, and we'll submit and post a final Q&A out there. You can see some of the Q&As from previous webinars on the Integration Program Group site. Click on the documents to the left of the site, and then you'll see folders in there. And in the 01 folder, FY15-16 AFCAMP, there is webinar slides, and there's also a folder for Q&As that we've done so far. So give us 2 business days, and we'll have that data out there for you. Again, we apologize for the audio issues here. We're trying to make the best a DCO across the CONUS and OCONUS for some of you guys.
All right, that's it from TNAP webinar. Thank you very much for tuning in. AFCAC West out.